In this video, we'll be learning how to solve absolute value equations. The absolute value is the distance away from zero. So the absolute value, for example, of -7 is equal to 7, since -7 is 7 units away from zero. Similarly, the absolute value of 5 is equal to 5, since 5 is 5 units away from zero. The absolute value represents a distance, therefore the absolute value is always a positive number or zero. We're going to be solving absolute value equations. An absolute value equation is an equation where the variable you're solving for is located inside the absolute value. We'll be using the absolute value equality property to solve these types of equations. This property says if the absolute value of ax plus b is equal to c, then ax plus b is either equal to c or it's equal to -c. This should make sense if you think about the question, the absolute value of what number equals, say, 2. Well, there's two different options. Either the absolute value of +2 equals 2, or the absolute value of -2 is equal to 2. Therefore, that question mark on the inside could be two different things. It could be 2 or it could be -2. And that's where this property comes from. Note that you'll have to isolate the absolute value before applying the property. There's nothing on that left-hand side but the absolute value. Second, if the lone absolute value ends up being equal to a negative number, there's no solution to the equation since absolute value is a distance and has to either be a positive number or 0. Let's solve the equation, the absolute value of 2 minus b plus 5 equals 6. We need to start by isolating the absolute value. So let's subtract 5 from both sides. This will give us the absolute value of 2 minus b equals 1. Now that we've isolated the absolute value, we want to check and make sure that it's not equal to a negative number. It's not, therefore we can apply our property, which says that our inside stuff either has to be equal to 1 or it has to be equal to -1. And then we solve these resulting equations. I'll start by subtracting 2 from both sides. And then dividing by -1. Our first solution is that b is equal to +1. We have another linear equation to solve. Again, we'll subtract 2 from both sides. And divide by -1, giving us our second solution of b equals +3. Let's solve the equation 6 times the absolute value of 2x plus 5 minus 3 equals 21. You'll notice that there's more things over with the absolute value this time. You never ever want to distribute into an absolute value, so we'll have to figure out how to get rid of that multiplication by 6 another way. We actually want to start by adding 3 to isolate the absolute value. Leaves us with 6 times the absolute value of 2x plus 5 equals 24. I mentioned that we cannot distribute into an absolute value. Therefore, to get rid of the 6, we will divide both sides by 6. This gives us the absolute value of 2x plus 5 is equal to 4. If you're ever unsure on what you should do first to isolate the absolute value, You could make a parallel equation over to the side and just replace the absolute value with a variable. I'll use A for absolute value. And then look at that. If you were going to solve for A, what would you do? Add 3 and then divide by 6. So if you're ever confused, you can always do that on the side to help you make your choices. Now that we've isolated our absolute value, we want to check and make sure that it's equal to a positive number or 0. It is. Therefore, we can apply our property, which says the stuff inside the absolute value has to be equal to 4, or it could be equal to -4. And we solve these resulting equations. Subtracting 5 from both sides, we get 2x is equal to -1. Divide by 2. Our first solution is x equals -1/2. Solving our other equation, again, we'll subtract 5 from both sides. 2x is equal to -9. Dividing both sides by 2. We get our second solution to be x equals -9/2. The next equation we want to solve is -2 times the absolute value of x minus 4 plus 1 equals 7. We want to start by isolating our absolute value. The first thing we do is subtract 1 from both sides. This gives us -2 times the absolute value of x minus 4 equals 6. Next, we'll divide both sides by -2. This gives us the absolute value of x minus 4 is equal to -3. Before we apply our property, we want to check and make sure that our absolute value is not equal to a negative number. In this example, it is equal to a negative number, and we know that can't happen. Therefore, our solution is that there isn't one. We have no solution.